He struggled between Marcus and the attacker reached its climax when Marcus managed to knock the explosive device away from both of them. It skittered across the tarmac, coming to rest near the aircraft's landing gear, still armed, but temporarily out of reach of the terrorist. Princess Charlotte watched as Marcus and his opponent continued their desperate fight, both men showing signs of exhaustion and injury. Blood was visible on Marcus's face, and his protective vest had been torn during the struggle. The terrorist was favoring his left arm, suggesting that Marcus had managed to inflict some damage as well. Sarah spoke urgently into her radio. "We need explosive disposal units on scene immediately. Device is loose on tarmac near aircraft landing gear. Cannot evacuate until device is secured." The response was immediate. "Bomb disposal team is 3 minutes out. Maintain position until device is rendered safe." 3 minutes might as well have been 3 hours in their current situation. Marcus and the attacker were still fighting. Other threats might still be present around the airport perimeter, and an armed explosive device lay just meters from their aircraft. Captain Morrison's voice came over the intercom again. "I'm monitoring emergency frequencies. Additional security teams are sweeping the entire airport. They found 2 more suspicious vehicles and are treating this as a coordinated terrorist attack." The scope of the threat was becoming clearer. This wasn't a random attempt to harm Princess Charlotte. It was a carefully planned operation involving multiple teams and sophisticated equipment. The implications for royal security protocols would be enormous. Marcus finally gained the upper hand in his fight with the terrorist. Years of military training and royal protection experience gave him the skills he needed to subdue his opponent. With a final burst of effort, he managed to pin the attacker face down on the tarmac and secure his hands behind his back using zip-tie restraints from his equipment belt. Hostile subject secured. Marcus called out breathlessly. "Need immediate medical attention and prisoner transport." Princess Charlotte felt a wave of relief wash over her as she watched Marcus stand up from the struggle, clearly injured but victorious. However, the explosive device still lay on the ground, its status unknown and its threat still very real. Sarah maintained her position at the emergency exit while keeping Princess Charlotte back from the door opening. "The immediate threat is neutralized, but we still can't move until that device is cleared." Airport security forces were now establishing a wider perimeter around the aircraft, while specialists prepared to deal with the explosive device. Princess Charlotte could see teams of armed officers taking positions throughout the area, ensuring that no additional threats could approach. The bomb disposal team arrived in their specialized vehicle, moving with practiced efficiency toward the device. Princess Charlotte watched as they deployed their equipment and began the delicate process of determining what type of explosive they were dealing with and how to render it safe. Marcus, despite his injuries, remained on scene to coordinate with the bomb disposal specialists. His experience and knowledge of the attack sequence would be crucial in helping them understand what they were facing. "The device appears to be a sophisticated improvised explosive," the bomb disposal leader reported. "Commercial plastic explosive with electronic timer. Still active, but timer has been damaged in the struggle. We're proceeding with manual disarmament." Princess Charlotte found herself holding her breath as the specialists worked on the device. She could see them using careful movements and specialized tools to access the explosive's components. One wrong move could still result in a detonation that would damage the aircraft and potentially harm everyone nearby. Sarah received an update through her radio. "Additional threats have been neutralized around the airport perimeter. We had a total of 7 subjects involved in the operation, all now either captured or neutralized." This was definitely a coordinated assault. The revelation that 7 people had been involved in the attack was sobering. If the operation had been successful, it would have been one of the most significant security breaches in modern royal history. "Your Royal Highness," Sarah said, "we're getting reports that the investigation is revealing this was a well-funded, professionally planned operation. Someone spent considerable time and money organizing this attack." Princess Charlotte nodded grimly. She understood the implications. This wasn't just about her personally. It was an attack on the institution of the monarchy and the stability it represented. The fact that it had been planned so carefully suggested that her family and other royals might still be at risk. The bomb disposal team worked for another tense 10 minutes before finally announcing success. Device has been rendered safe. Explosive material has been separated from the detonation system. Area is clear for evacuation. The relief in Sarah's voice was audible as she responded. Copy that. Preparing for evacuation now. But, as they prepared to leave the aircraft, Princess Charlotte made an unexpected decision. Instead of immediately evacuating to safety, she asked Sarah to delay for a few moments so she could check on Marcus, who was still receiving medical attention on the tarmac. Your Royal Highness, protocol requires immediate evacuation to a secure location, Sarah protested. Marcus risked his life to save mine. Princess Charlotte replied firmly. I need to make sure he's all right before we leave. It was a decision that demonstrated the character that had made Princess Charlotte respected even among her protection officers. Despite the danger she had just faced, her first concern was for the man who had protected her. Sarah understood the princess's feelings but had to balance them against security concerns. We can check on Marcus, but only briefly and with full security escort. They exited the aircraft using the emergency slide, which felt surreal after the intensity of the previous hour. Princess Charlotte's feet touched the tarmac for the first time since boarding the aircraft, and she was immediately surrounded by protection officers who formed a security bubble around her. Marcus was being treated by paramedics near one of the emergency vehicles. He had sustained several injuries during his fight with the attacker, including a cut on his forehead that required stitches and what appeared to be bruised ribs from the physical struggle. When he saw Princess Charlotte approaching, Marcus attempted to stand at attention despite his injuries. Your Royal Highness, are you unharmed? I'm fine, Marcus, but only because of your courage, Princess Charlotte replied. You saved my life today. Marcus, despite his pain, managed a slight smile. Just doing my job, ma'am. That's what we're here for. But Princess Charlotte knew it was much more than just doing a job. Marcus had put himself in mortal danger to protect her, fighting an armed terrorist in hand-to-hand combat, while under fire from other attackers. His actions went far beyond the call of duty. The paramedic treating Marcus looked up at Princess Charlotte. He's going to be fine, Your Highness. Some cuts and bruises, possibly a cracked rib, but nothing that won't heal. He's very lucky. We're all very lucky, Princess Charlotte replied, looking around at the scene of destruction on the tarmac. The coordinated attack could have had a very different outcome if not for the quick thinking and courage of her protection team. Sarah approached with an update on their next steps. Your Royal Highness, we have secure transport ready to take you to a safe location. The environmental summit has been postponed while security reviews are conducted. Princess Charlotte felt disappointment about missing the summit, but she understood that her safety had to take priority. The young people who had been expecting to hear her speak would understand that circumstances beyond her control had intervened. As they prepared to leave the scene, Princess Charlotte took one last look at the aircraft that had been her refuge during the attack. The emergency slide still hung from the open door, and she could see the areas where bullets had struck the ground nearby. It was a sobering reminder of how close they had all come to tragedy. The investigation that followed would reveal the full extent of the terrorist plot. The 7 attackers had been planning the operation for months, studying royal travel patterns and airport security procedures. They had targeted Princess Charlotte specifically because of her high profile and her advocacy for environmental causes that some extremist groups opposed. Intelligence agencies discovered that the attack had been funded by a network of organizations that opposed the royal family's influence on government policy. The sophistication of the operation and the resources behind it indicated that other members of the royal family might still be at risk. Marcus spent 3 days in the hospital recovering from his injuries, but returned to duty the following week, despite offers of extended leave. His actions during the attack earned him a commendation for bravery and a personal letter of gratitude from the Queen herself. Princess Charlotte's environmental advocacy continued, but with enhanced security measures that reflected the new threat assessment. She insisted on maintaining her public engagement schedule, refusing to let the terrorist attack deter her from her duties and her causes. The attack at Heathrow became a case study in royal protection protocols and led to significant changes in security procedures for royal travel. The coordination between different agencies during the crisis was praised, But the investigation also revealed gaps that needed to be addressed. Sarah Chun was promoted to Senior Protection Officer in recognition of her professional handling of the crisis. Her calm demeanor and effective coordination during the attack had been crucial in keeping Princess Charlotte safe, while backup units responded to the threat. Captain Morrison and his co-pilot Amanda Walsh received recognition for their professional handling of the aircraft during the emergency. Their implementation of security protocols and coordination with ground forces had prevented the attackers from gaining access to the aircraft through normal entry points. The bomb disposal team was commended for their successful disarmament of the explosive device under extremely challenging circumstances. Their work had prevented what could have been a catastrophic detonation that would have caused multiple casualties. Princess Charlotte's first public appearance after the attack was at a memorial service for victims of terrorism. In her speech, she spoke about the courage of ordinary people who risk their lives to protect others and the importance of not allowing fear to change how democratic societies function. The investigation into the terrorist network continued for months, leading to additional arrests and the disruption of other planned attacks. The plot against Princess Charlotte had been part of a larger campaign of violence that was prevented by the swift action at Heathrow and the subsequent investigation. Marcus returned to his duties as Princess Charlotte's protection officer, but their relationship had been changed by the shared experience of the attack. They had both faced mortal danger together, and the bond of trust between them had been strengthened by the crisis. The environmental summit that Princess Charlotte had been traveling to attend was eventually rescheduled, and her speech about ocean conservation was delivered to an even larger audience than originally planned. The media attention from the terrorist attack had inadvertently given her platform a much wider reach. In her speech, Princess Charlotte spoke about the importance of protecting the things we value most, whether that's marine ecosystems or the people we care about. She drew parallels between conservation efforts and the courage required to defend democracy against those who would use violence to silence important voices. The attack at Heathrow Airport became a defining moment in Princess Charlotte's life, demonstrating both her vulnerability as a public figure and her strength in the face of adversity. It reinforced her commitment to public service while highlighting the dangers faced by those who protect her and her family. Marcus Stone continued his career in royal protection for several more years before eventually retiring to spend more time with his own family. His actions that day at Heathrow remained a highlight of his service record and a testament to the dedication of the men and women who protect the royal family. The aircraft that had been their sanctuary during the attack was eventually returned to service after extensive security modifications. It continued to serve the royal family for many years, though Princess Charlotte always felt a special connection to it as the place where she had witnessed such extraordinary courage and dedication. The story of the attack and the heroic response became part of the training curriculum for new royal protection officers, serving as an example of how proper preparation, quick thinking, and personal courage can overcome even the most sophisticated terrorist plots. Years later, Princess Charlotte would look back on that day at Heathrow as a turning point in her understanding of both the responsibilities and the risks that came with her position. It had shown her the true meaning of service, as demonstrated by people like Marcus Stone, who put their lives on the line to protect others. The environmental causes that Princess Charlotte championed continued to benefit from the increased public attention that followed the attack. Ironically, the terrorists who had tried to silence her voice had instead amplified it, giving her message about protecting the planet an even larger platform than she had originally hoped to achieve. The silence that followed the cessation of noise at the aircraft's main door stretched for what felt like hours, but was actually only 30 seconds. Princess Charlotte pressed her face against the window, trying to see what was happening outside. The attackers seemed to have regrouped behind a fuel tanker, while Marcus and the airport security forces had established positions behind various pieces of ground equipment. Sarah kept her weapon trained on the aircraft's main door while speaking quietly into her radio. "Control, this is Protection Officer Chun. We have Princess Charlotte secure, but trapped on aircraft. Request immediate tactical response team and medical standby. Situation is code red. Repeat, code red." The response came back immediately. "Protection Officer Chun, tactical response team is en route. ETA 4 minutes. Counterterrorism unit has been notified. Maintain position and prepare for coordinated response. For minutes felt like an eternity when armed attackers were trying to breach their aircraft. Princess Charlotte could see that one of the attackers had moved around to the aircraft's starboard side and appeared to be examining the emergency exit that Sarah had been preparing for their escape. "Sarah," Charlotte whispered urgently. "There's someone checking the emergency exit on the right side of the plane." Sarah immediately moved to verify the princess's observation. Through the small porthole window, she could see a figure in coveralls studying the emergency door mechanism. Their escape route was being compromised. "Control, we have a hostile examining our planned egress route. Request immediate intervention," Sarah reported while moving back to cover the main cabin door. Outside, Marcus had taken charge of the security response. His military background before joining Royal Protection had prepared him for exactly this type of situation. He coordinated with the airport security chief to establish overlapping fields of fire while ensuring that Princess Charlotte's aircraft remained in a secure zone. "We need to establish a clear corridor from the aircraft to the terminal building," Marcus instructed the security team. "I want snipers on the control tower and the maintenance hangar roof. Nobody gets closer to that aircraft without being neutralized." The lead airport security officer, Inspector Janet Mills, nodded grimly. "My men are in position. Counterterrorism units are 3 minutes out. Do we know what these subjects want?" "Unknown at this time," Marcus replied while adjusting his position to get a better view of the aircraft. "Could be kidnapping attempt, assassination plot, or terrorist action. Right now, our priority is keeping the princess safe and neutralizing the threat." Inside the aircraft, Captain Morrison had activated all emergency protocols. The aircraft's communications systems were recording everything, black boxes were secured, and emergency beacons were broadcasting their position to all relevant authorities. He had also initiated lockdown procedures that sealed all external access points except for emergency exits that required special tools to open from outside. "Your Royal Highness," Morrison called back to the cabin. "The aircraft is now in full emergency lockdown. The main door cannot be opened from outside without specialized equipment that these subjects hopefully don't possess. However, we need to be prepared for alternative extraction methods." Princess Charlotte tried to remain calm, but the reality of being trapped while armed men attempted to reach her was terrifying. She thought about her family, about the summit she was supposed to attend, about the young people who were waiting to hear her speak about protecting the oceans. The irony wasn't lost on her that while she planned to talk about saving marine life, her own life was now in danger. The sound of rotors approaching caught everyone's attention. A police helicopter was incoming, which would provide aerial surveillance and potentially additional tactical options. Princess Charlotte could see it approaching through the aircraft windows, flying low and fast across the airport grounds. Sarah received another radio transmission. "Protection Officer Chun, we have aerial support on station. They report 3 subjects still active around your position, plus possible additional threats in 2 vehicles on the perimeter road. Be advised that this may be a larger operation than initially assessed." The news that this might be more than just 3 attackers sent a chill through both Sarah and Princess Charlotte. If there were additional threats positioned around the airport, their situation was even more serious than they had realized. Marcus, monitoring the same communications, immediately requested additional backup. "Control, if we're looking at a coordinated assault with multiple teams, I need a full tactical response. Request armed response units and military assistance if available." "Copy that, Marcus. Military assistance is being considered at the highest levels. Continue to hold position and protect the package." The package was Royal Protection Code for Princess Charlotte, a term that always made her feel slightly uncomfortable but which she understood was necessary for security communications. Suddenly, the aircraft shuddered slightly as something heavy impacted against the hull. Princess Charlotte looked at Sarah with alarm. "What was that?" Sarah was already moving to investigate, weapon ready. "Someone just made contact with the aircraft. Stay in your seat and be ready to move if I give the signal." Through the cockpit windows, Captain Morrison could see that one of the attackers had thrown a grappling hook onto the aircraft's wing and was attempting to climb up to access the emergency exits from above. This was a level of sophistication that suggested military or special forces training. "We have a climber on the starboard wing," Morrison reported over the radio. "Subject appears to be attempting to access emergency exits from above. This is not a random attack. These people know aircraft security systems." Marcus received the report and immediately coordinated with the sniper teams that were getting into position. "Sniper 1, do you have eyes on the subject on the aircraft wing?" "Affirmative. Subject is carrying what appears to be cutting tools and electronic equipment. Requesting permission to engage." Marcus had to make a split-second decision. Engaging the target would eliminate one threat, but might provoke the others into more aggressive action. However, allowing the attacker to gain access to the aircraft was not an option. "Permission granted. Take the shot when you have a clear opportunity." The crack of the sniper rifle was audible inside the aircraft, followed by the sound of something heavy falling onto the tarmac. Princess Charlotte flinched at the noise, knowing that someone had just been shot to protect her. The reality of violence, even in her defense, was disturbing. "Target neutralized," came the report from the sniper. 2 subjects remaining active. But instead of deterring the remaining attackers, the sniper shot seemed to galvanize them into more desperate action. One of the remaining men produced what appeared to be a small explosive device and began moving directly toward the aircraft. "We have a subject with possible explosives approaching the aircraft," Marcus shouted into his radio. "All units engage immediately." The final phase of the assault began with a coordinated push by the remaining attackers. They had clearly planned for the possibility of taking casualties and were implementing a backup plan that involved higher risks but potentially greater impact. Sarah saw the man with the explosive device running toward their aircraft and made an immediate decision. "Your Royal Highness, we're evacuating now. Stay behind me and move exactly as I direct." She activated the emergency exit, which deployed with a pneumatic hiss. The escape slide inflated automatically, providing a rapid way down to the tarmac. But as soon as the door opened, they could hear gunfire much more clearly, along with shouting and the sound of vehicles racing across the airport grounds. "Go, go, go," Sarah urged, helping Princess Charlotte toward the emergency exit. But as they reached the door, Princess Charlotte could see the man with the explosive device was now very close to the aircraft. If they evacuated now, they might be running directly into danger. If they stayed, the aircraft might become a target for the explosive. "Sarah, he's right below us." Charlotte pointed to the attacker who was now almost directly beneath their emergency exit. Sarah had to make an impossible choice. Every second of delay increased the risk that the explosive device would detonate. But evacuating into the path of an armed attacker was equally dangerous. Marcus, seeing the situation develop, took matters into his own hands. He left his covered position and sprinted directly toward the aircraft, hoping to intercept the attacker with the explosive before he could use it. Princess Charlotte watched from the emergency door as Marcus ran across open ground with complete disregard for his own safety. He was putting himself between her and the threat, just as he had sworn to do when he took his oath as a royal protection officer. The remaining attackers saw Marcus's movement and turned their fire toward him. Bullets struck the ground around his feet as he zigzagged across the tarmac, but his determination never wavered. He reached the attacker with the explosive device just as the man was preparing to deploy it. The 2 men collided in a violent struggle, fighting for control of the device while gunfire erupted around them. Princess Charlotte could only watch in horror as Marcus, the man who had protected her for 3 years, fought for both their lives against an armed terrorist. Airport security forces used Marcus's assault as cover to advance their own positions, but the outcome of the hand-to-hand combat would determine whether Princess Charlotte lived or died in the next few seconds. Sarah kept her weapon trained on the struggle below while maintaining her grip on Princess Charlotte's arm. "Be ready to move," she whispered. "As soon as Marcus secures that device, we're evacuating." The fight on the tarmac was brutal and desperate. Both Marcus and the attacker understood that the stakes were life and death, not just for them but for the young woman watching from the aircraft door above. The explosive device lay on the ground between them as they fought for position and advantage. Princess Charlotte found herself thinking about all the people who had dedicated their lives to protecting her and her family. Marcus had a wife and daughter who were probably going about their normal day, unaware that their husband and father was fighting for his life on an airport tarmac. The struggle below was reaching its climax when additional gunfire erupted from the counter-terrorism units that had finally arrived on scene. The remaining attacker who had been providing covering fire was neutralized, leaving Marcus in single combat with the man who held the key to their survival. "Come on, Marcus," Princess Charlotte whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her. "Please be safe." The outcome of the next few seconds would determine whether this was a successful protection operation or a tragedy that would shake the royal family and the nation. The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac at Heathrow Airport's private aviation section. Royal Protection Officer Marcus Stone adjusted his earpiece and scanned the area with practiced eyes. At 34, he had spent 8 years protecting members of the royal family, but today felt different. There was tension in the air that he couldn't quite place. Princess Charlotte, now 16, was scheduled to fly to Edinburgh for a youth environmental summit. The trip had been planned for months, but recent security briefings had mentioned increased chatter about potential threats to the royal family. Marcus and his partner, Officer Sarah Chun, had arrived 2 hours early to conduct their standard security sweep of the aircraft. The private jet, a sleek Gulfstream G650, sat gleaming on the tarmac. Its registration number, GRYB, marked it clearly as part of the royal fleet. The aircraft had been thoroughly inspected by aviation security, but Marcus never took chances. He walked around the exterior, checking for anything unusual, while Sarah coordinated with the flight crew inside. Captain David Morrison, a veteran pilot with 23 years of experience flying for the royal family, greeted Sarah with his usual professional demeanor. "All systems check out perfectly," he reported. "Weather looks good for the flight north. We should have Princess Charlotte in Edinburgh right on schedule." Co-pilot Amanda Walsh nodded in agreement. "I've filed our flight plan, and we have clearance for departure at 1100 hours. The aircraft has been fueled and is ready to go." Sarah made notes on her checklist. The cabin had been configured for the princess's comfort, with fresh flowers, her preferred mineral water, and a selection of books about marine biology, her current passion. Everything seemed to be in order, yet she shared Marcus's uneasy feeling about the day. At 10:30, the royal convoy arrived. 3 black Range Rovers with tinted windows pulled up to the aircraft. Princess Charlotte emerged from the middle vehicle, looking every bit the poised young royal she had become. Her auburn hair was pulled back in an elegant bun, and she wore a navy blue coat dress that was both appropriate for the environmental summit and practical for travel. "Good morning, Marcus, Sarah," Charlotte greeted them warmly. Despite her royal status, she had always been friendly with her protection officers, understanding that their job was to keep her safe. "I'm looking forward to the summit. Did you know that Scotland is leading the UK in renewable energy production?" Marcus smiled. The princess's enthusiasm for environmental causes was genuine and infectious. "That's fascinating, Your Royal Highness. I'm sure your speech will inspire many young people today." As Charlotte boarded the aircraft, Marcus conducted his final external inspection. He noticed a maintenance truck parked near the fence line, about 200 meters away. Something about it caught his attention, perhaps the way the driver seemed to be watching the aircraft rather than working on whatever equipment he was supposed to be servicing. Marcus spoke into his radio. "Sarah, do you have eyes on the maintenance vehicle at 2 o'clock from our position? Driver appears to be observing rather than working." Sarah's voice crackled back through his earpiece. "I see it. I'll contact airport security to verify their presence." Inside the aircraft, Princess Charlotte settled into her seat and reviewed her speech notes one final time. She had worked hard on this presentation about ocean conservation, knowing that her words could influence policy and inspire action. The summit was important to her, and she wanted to make a meaningful contribution. Captain Morrison began his pre-flight checks while Amanda coordinated with air traffic control. The engines spooled up with their characteristic whine, and all systems showed green across the board. Everything was proceeding normally when airport security called Sarah with concerning news. "Officer Chun, we have no record of any scheduled maintenance in that area today. We're dispatching a team to investigate, but they're requesting that you delay departure until we can verify the situation." Sarah immediately contacted Marcus, who was positioning himself near the aircraft's boarding stairs. "Marcus, we have a potential security concern. Airport security is investigating the maintenance vehicle. No scheduled work in that area today." Before Marcus could respond, he saw movement from the maintenance truck. 3 men in coveralls were walking briskly toward the aircraft, carrying what appeared to be toolboxes. Their body language was wrong, too focused, too purposeful for routine maintenance workers. "Sarah, we have movement from the vehicle. 3 subjects approaching the aircraft. This doesn't feel right," Marcus reported while moving to intercept them. Inside the cabin, Princess Charlotte noticed that the engines, which had been running, suddenly shut down. Captain Morrison's voice came over the intercom. "Your Royal Highness, we're experiencing a brief delay. Please remain seated while we address a minor technical issue." But Charlotte could see through the window that something more serious was happening. Marcus was walking quickly toward 3 men who were approaching the aircraft. Sarah was speaking urgently into her radio while moving toward the cockpit. The princess had been around security operations long enough to recognize when a situation was escalating. The 3 men from the maintenance truck were now jogging toward the aircraft. Marcus intercepted them about 50 meters from the plane, his hand moving instinctively toward his concealed weapon. "Stop right there," he commanded with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Identify yourselves and state your business." The lead man, tall with a beard and wearing stained coveralls, smiled but didn't slow his approach. "Just routine maintenance, mate. Nothing to worry about." But Marcus noticed several things wrong with their story. Their coveralls were too clean except for obvious dirt stains that looked freshly applied. The toolboxes they carried seemed too light for actual tools. Most importantly, their shoes were expensive athletic footwear, not the steel-toed boots that actual maintenance workers would wear. "I need to see your identification and work orders," Marcus demanded, positioning himself between the men and the aircraft. Instead of complying, the 3 men exchanged glances and, suddenly, sprinted toward the plane. Marcus immediately drew his weapon and shouted into his radio, "Code Red. Code Red. Hostile subjects attempting to breach aircraft security." Sarah, hearing the alert, rushed to secure Princess Charlotte while Captain Morrison began emergency shutdown procedures. The princess, looking out the window, could see Marcus with his weapon drawn, facing 3 men who were now clearly not maintenance workers. Airport security vehicles were racing toward their position, sirens wailing, but they were still minutes away. Marcus was alone against 3 attackers who had obviously planned this operation carefully. He fired 2 warning shots into the air, hoping to deter them, but they continued their advance. The lead attacker suddenly produced a pistol from his toolbox and fired at Marcus, who dove behind a nearby fuel truck for cover. The shot went wide, but it was clear that these men were willing to use deadly force to reach the aircraft. Inside the plane, Princess Charlotte watched in horror as the situation unfolded. Sarah was trying to move her away from the windows while coordinating with backup units. But Charlotte could see that Marcus was outnumbered and outgunned. "Sarah, we have to help him," Charlotte said urgently. "He's alone out there against 3 armed men." "Your Royal Highness, my job is to protect you. Marcus is trained for this situation, and backup is on the way. We need to get you to a more secure location." But even as Sarah spoke, they could see that the attackers were using Marcus's position behind the fuel truck to advance on the aircraft from different angles. One man was providing covering fire while the other 2 moved to flank his position. Captain Morrison's voice came through the cabin speakers, tight with tension. "We have hostile subjects on the tarmac. I'm implementing emergency lockdown procedures. Everyone needs to move to the rear of the aircraft and prepare for possible evacuation." Princess Charlotte felt a surge of fear, not just for her own safety but for Marcus, who was risking his life to protect her. She had known him for 3 years, had celebrated his daughter's birthday parties, had heard stories about his family. He wasn't just her protection officer. He was someone she cared about. The sound of gunfire outside intensified as airport security units finally arrived on scene. Marcus used the distraction to advance his position, but Charlotte could see that one of the attackers had broken away from the group and was heading directly for the aircraft's main door. Sarah had moved to cover the aircraft's entrance, her weapon drawn and ready. The princess realized that they were trapped on the plane with armed attackers approaching from multiple directions. The situation was escalating rapidly, and despite all the security measures in place, they were in real danger. Through the aircraft windows, Charlotte could see more security vehicles arriving, but the attackers seemed prepared for a prolonged engagement. They had taken cover behind various pieces of ground equipment and were exchanging fire with both Marcus and the approaching security forces. "Sarah," Princess Charlotte said quietly, "what's our evacuation plan if they breach the aircraft?" Sarah's expression was grim as she checked her weapon and radio. "There's an emergency exit at the rear of the aircraft. If necessary, we'll evacuate through there and move to a secure position until backup can extract us safely." But even as she spoke, both women could hear someone trying to force open the aircraft's main door. The emergency locks were holding for now, but they weren't designed to withstand a determined assault for very long. The sound of metal being manipulated and tools being used came through the aircraft's hull. Whoever was trying to gain entry had come prepared with the right equipment to breach the aircraft's security systems. Captain Morrison's voice came over the intercom again, more urgent now. "We have someone attempting to breach the main entry door. I'm declaring an emergency evacuation. All passengers prepare to exit through the rear emergency door on my signal." Princess Charlotte felt her heart racing as the reality of the situation hit her. Despite all the security measures, all the planning, and all the protection around her, she was in genuine danger. The sound of gunfire outside continued, punctuated by shouts and the wail of sirens as more emergency vehicles arrived. Sarah moved to the aircraft's rear emergency exit and began preparing it for deployment. "Your Royal Highness, when I give the signal, we're going to exit quickly and move to cover behind those aircraft maintenance buildings. Stay low and stay close to me." The princess nodded, trying to control her breathing and focus on Sarah's instructions. She had trained for emergency situations, but this was her first real crisis. Everything depended on the next few minutes and whether their security team could regain control of the situation. Outside, Marcus had linked up with the airport security forces and was coordinating a response to neutralize the attackers. But with Princess Charlotte trapped on the aircraft and unknown numbers of potential additional threats, every second counted. The sound at the main door suddenly stopped, replaced by an ominous silence that was somehow more frightening than the previous noise. Sarah positioned herself at the emergency exit, ready to evacuate the princess at a moment's notice. "Stay ready," Sarah whispered. "We may need to move very quickly." Princess Charlotte gripped the armrest of her seat, watching through the windows as the drama unfolded outside, knowing that her life and the lives of those protecting her hung in the balance of the next few critical moments.